Have you ever felt like no one really saw you? Like no matter how hard you tried to be strong, the world just kept walking past you. As if you were invisible? She felt that every single day. Until the moment she decided to stop the see, or stop rushing, and simply see someone everyone else ignored, soaking wet, silent, hurt. That rainy night, she offered nothing but a cup of tea and a roof, without knowing she was opening the door to the new CEO of the company she worked for, a man who was hiding. More than just a powerful name, he was hiding pain, hiding who he was, hiding a deep longing to be seen by someone who wanted nothing in return. This story isn't about fame or fortune or fate. It's about something much deeper. The courage to stay, care for someone, even when they have nothing to give back, look into their eyes and with your heart say, I see you. If you've ever felt that everything could change with one small gesture, stay with us. Because here, every video is more than just entertainment. It's a hug for your soul, a reminder that true love still exists. And sometimes, it begins in the rain. Subscribe to the channel now, because stories like this aren't just made to watch, they're made to feel. And if you believe that, you're already part of our story. The rain pounded against the windshield as Emily turned onto the gravel road, her headlights illuminating thick puddles and twisted trees. The day had already been far too long, and all she wanted was to get home, take a hot shower, and forget. She was working overtime just to maintain a life that felt far too small. Her soaked coat filled the car with a heavy smell of dampness, but she didn't care. The radio crackled between stations, and the raindrops drummed like a heartbeat on the roof. The road was almost deserted, except for a shadow up ahead, barely lit. Emily squinted, heart racing. There was something, or someone, lying on the edge of the road. She slammed on the brakes, the tires sliding in the mud. The car skidded slightly but stopped just a few feet from the fallen figure. Emily hesitated, glancing around. No sign of help. No cars. No living soul. Fear pulsed in her throat. What if it was a trap? Just another setup like the ones on the news. But then the man moved, barely. A weak groan escaped his lips, and blood trickled from his forehead onto the wet ground. Emily opened the door on instinct. The cutting wind slapped her face. She ran toward him, her shoes sinking into the mud. The man tried to stand but collapsed again, his legs refusing to cooperate. His face was contorted in pain, streaked with rain and blood. His shirt was torn, and a deep cut bled from his shoulder. When his eyes flickered open, they were intense, but disoriented. Don't call anyone, please, he whispered. Just get me out of here. Logic screamed for her to run, but something in his eyes stopped her. There was a plea for help and secrecy. Emily gripped his arm, feeling the weight of a body too weak to carry itself. Can you stand? She asked, breathless, rain soaking her hair. He only nodded, trembling. With effort, she helped him to the car. Each step was a struggle. He nearly passed out before reaching the back seat. Once she got him inside, Emily noticed her hands were covered in blood. The seat was stained red, and his breathing came in shallow bursts. She wanted to call 911, but his voice still echoed in her head. Don't call anyone. Something didn't add up. This wasn't just any man. His posture, his way of speaking, even injured, there was something there. Something hidden beneath the pain. She sped off, taking side roads until they reached her modest home at the edge of town. A simple two-story house, dim lights, a narrow porch. The kind of place no one would expect to find a mysterious man on the brink of collapse. Emily pulled into the covered driveway and ran to unlock the front door. Her dog barked, startled by the stranger. Shoo, it's okay, she said, more to herself than to the animal. With difficulty, she dragged the man inside, his weight leaning heavily on her shoulders. He was half-conscious now, mumbling incoherently. Pale skin, blood, trickling down his temple. She laid him on the living room couch and rushed to the closet, grabbing the old first aid kit. Her hands trembled as she cleaned the wound. It was deep, but not fatal. You need stitches, she muttered, but he shook his head. I can't, not now. Just need to rest. Emily sighed, confused and afraid. The storm outside raged on, and she felt like she had crossed some invisible line. This man, who was he? Why was he so afraid of being found? His clothes, though dirty, were expensive. The watch on his wrist glinted under the soft lamplight. It was luxury, she could tell. She sat across from him, watching in silence. For the first time in a long while, her home held a secret. He was asleep now, breathing heavily. Emily covered him with a blanket and turned off the TV, which still whispered headlines about politics and markets. She tried to distract herself, but something inside wouldn't let her rest. She went to the kitchen, made a cup of tea, and returned. The image of that man curled up on her couch felt completely out of place, and somehow just right. As if he were running from something she couldn't yet see. Hours passed. Midnight arrived quietly, and Emily dozed off in the armchair. But before dawn, something stirred her awake. A whisper from the couch. She stood slowly. The man was shifting, restless, as if reliving a nightmare. They betrayed me, my brother. She knew. The accident, he murmured. Emily froze beside him, heart pounding. This wasn't just physical pain. It was trauma. It was pursuit. And suddenly, she was right in the middle of it. Emily knelt down and gently touched his arm that he flinched, eyes snapping open in a panic. His gaze was distant, caught somewhere between the past and the present. You're safe now, she said softly, trying to project calm, even though she felt none. He stared at her for a few seconds, as if trying to remember who she was. Then, he whispered, Why did you help me? Emily took a deep breath. Because you needed it, and no one else was there. He seemed to take in her words. His eyes slowly closed again, but not before he said something that made her blood run cold. They'll come for me. They always do. Emily stayed silent, trying to understand what that meant. Who were they? What had he done? Or what had been done to him? The pieces didn't fit yet, but she knew one thing. She couldn't leave him alone. Not yet. The rain stopped by the end of the night, and the city fell into a thick, heavy silence. Emily washed the blood from her hands, changed the sofa linens, and tried to clean the floor. But a trail of tension lingered through the house like something invisible and heavy. Something told her that this man carried far more than physical wounds. She turned the radio on low, hoping to push the thoughts away that a news report interrupted. The music. Sources confirmed that Daniel Grant, CEO of Grant Industries, remains missing. Investigations are ongoing. The name struck her like thunder. Emily turned slowly to face the man asleep on her couch. Daniel Grant. The name that had been plastered across headlines months ago. Scandals. Disappearance. Rumors of death. Her gaze dropped to his injured face. There was a resemblance to the photos she vaguely remembered. Could it really be? Could this man be the billionaire the entire world was looking for? Unsure of what to do, she picked up her phone, her hands shaking. She searched for recent images of Daniel Grant. Each photo confirmed what she feared. It was him. The strong jawline, the shape of his eyes, the scar on his left brow. It was him. Emily sat down on the kitchen floor, overwhelmed. The man she had rescued wasn't just a stranger. He was someone whose secrets could put her life in danger. The sky began to lighten. The clock read 6:14 and Emily was still awake, staring out the window. With wide eyes, the street looked calm. But for how long? What would she do when someone found out he was here? And why had he run? Had he really committed the crimes they claimed? Or was he another victim of the ruthless games played by the powerful? She needed answers. But more than that, she needed to decide who to trust. The man stirred again. He looked more alert now, his eyes clearer. When she approached, he tried to sit up but groaned in pain. You're still weak. Lie down, she said firmly. He obeyed. Where am I? He asked. In my house. You collapsed on the road. You were hurt. I brought you here. There was a strange silence. Then he muttered, You shouldn't have done that. Emily crossed her arms, resolute. If you're trying to scare me, it won't work. I wouldn't leave a dog out in the rain. Like that, let alone a person. He gave a faint, crooked smile, as if the idea was unfamiliar. You're different, he said in a low voice. Emily looked away. She wasn't sure if that was a compliment or a warning, but she knew that what she'd done might have serious consequences. Still, she couldn't bring herself to regret it. She made something simple for him to eat. Hot tea, toast, and fruit. When she returned to the living room, he was sitting up, staring into space. Is someone looking for you? She asked. He didn't answer right away, then nodded. A lot of people, but they're not friends. They don't want me alive. They want me silent. Those words hung in the air, heavy with fear and truth. Emily felt a chill down her spine. What had started as compassion had now turned into danger. Outside, the first ray of sunlight pierced the clouds, casting a golden glow on the wet trees. Emily looked out the window, and what she saw made her heart stop. Two black cars were turning the corner slowly, that eye in the distance. The faint sound of helicopter blades drew closer. The man behind her closed his eyes with resignation. They're here. And before Emily could react, the quiet world around her was swallowed by chaos. Emily shut the curtains on instinct, trying to hide her house from the eyes now watching from above. The helicopters grew louder, the sound slicing through the air like blades. The black cars stopped just a few meters away, and men in dark suits stepped out in silence, communicating through radios. She froze. They were here for him. For Daniel, the mysterious man who now occupied her couch, and her life that he knew. And he was ready to disappear again. "I need to leave," he said, his voice still weak but firm. "If they find me here, they'll drag you into this." Emily stopped him with a gesture. "You can barely stand." He tried to rise anyway, staggering. "You don't understand, Emily. I didn't vanish out of fear. I was hunted." Her breath caught in her throat. He had said her name, though she'd never told him. "How do you know my name?" she asked. He looked away. "It was written on your mail. When you brought me in," he murmured. She didn't fully believe it, but let it slide. The knocking on the door made her jump. 3 sharp taps. Professional. Then silence. She walked carefully down the hall, steadying her steps. She peeked through the peephole. A man in a dark suit. No badge, no ID. Just a stern expression and folded hands. Waiting, she returned to the living room. There at the door, Daniel stood up with effort. "Don't open it. Don't tell them I'm here." She hesitated. She was breaking laws, harboring a fugitive. But something inside her screamed there was more to this story. That he was injured, vulnerable, and yet he seemed more human than all the sensational headlines she'd seen on TV. She nodded. "Stay here. Let me handle it." She returned to the door, took a deep breath, and opened it just a crack. "Can I help you?" The man at the door smiled, but it wasn't friendly. "Good morning. We're doing a security check. There was an incident nearby. Mind if we inspect your property?" Emily masked her tension. "What happened?" "Just a routine procedure, ma'am." She tightened her grip on the doorknob. "I'm not feeling well. I'd prefer if you came back another day." The man held her gaze. "May we insist?" She closed the door gently, saying nothing. Minutes passed. They didn't force their way in, but they remained outside, watching. Emily returned to the living room. Daniel stood by the curtain, peering out. "You should have let them in," he said. "They'll be back." She faced him. "And are you going to tell me who they are? Why you ran? Why they call you a criminal on TV?" He sat slowly, breathing heavily. "Because it's easier to sell lies than to face what really happened." Emily moved closer, sitting across from him. "Then tell me." Daniel hesitated, as if choosing words was harder than dodging bullets. "My name is Daniel Grant, CEO of Grant Industries. 3 months ago, I was ambushed. A car crashed into mine. They threw me off the road and left me for dead." Emily listened without blinking. "And why didn't you come back? Why run?" He met her eyes. "Because the one who ordered the hit is inside my own company." The confession hit her like a stone to the chest. "And why you?" Daniel drew a long breath. "Because I uncovered massive fraud, forged documents, and when I threatened to expose it, they tried to silence me. They'd rather eliminate me than face me in court." Emily felt the weight of every word. She was sitting in front of a man who had lost everything and was still standing. "So now what?" she asked. "Now I have to prove I'm alive, but I won't do it without revealing who destroyed me." She stood and walked to the kitchen. The kettle was whistling, slicing through the silence. She poured tea and came back with 2 mugs. "You need to rest. Regain your strength." Daniel took the cup and studied it. "No one's offered me tea since I was a kid." Emily smiled. "Here we do that. We offer tea, even to hunted billionaires." He smiled back, genuinely, for the first time, and for a few seconds, they weren't fugitive and caretaker, just 2 strangers trying to survive the chaos. Later that morning, Emily heard footsteps outside. The men had left their tea least for now. But she knew peace had an expiration date. Daniel was asleep again. His breathing was steady now. Emily watched him. She noticed his hands, small scars, but well kept. The suit, though dirty, was clearly tailored, and the gold watch he tried to hide under his sleeve. Every detail said the same. This man belonged to another world. Emily picked up her phone and searched again. The headline still listed him as missing. Fatal accident. Billionaire presumed dead. CEO vanished amid scandal. Every article painted Daniel as guilty, arrogant, or defeated. But the man on her couch looked broken, not corrupt. She wondered, how often does the media choose the most convenient villain? And why had she, of all people, been the one to find him? While Daniel slept, she changed the sheets again and burned the blood-stained papers. She didn't want to leave any traces. Something instinctive guided her. Maybe fear, maybe intuition. When she walked into the guest room and saw her father's old suitcase, she had an idea. She would help Daniel escape. But first, she wanted to understand who he was beyond the public version. And maybe, without realizing, she had already become part of the story. That same afternoon, she heard strange noises outside again. That IT wasn't the police or bodyguards this time. That IT was drones. 2 of them hovered overhead, clearly filming. Emily pulled Daniel away from the windows. They're hunting you like an animal. He didn't respond. He just sat on the floor, hands covering his face. Maybe that's what I've become, he murmured. Emily knelt beside him. Or maybe it's what they want the world to believe. Her words lingered in the air like smoke. Daniel looked up, exhausted. Why are you doing this for me? You don't even know me. Emily didn't hesitate. Because if I were in your place, I'd want someone to believe in me. That's all. He nodded slowly. And behind the hardened expression, a trace of humanity began to surface. For the first time in a long while, Daniel allowed himself to trust, even if just a little. Later that day, while he was taking a shower for the first time in days, Emily checked the inside pocket of his blazer. She found a sealed envelope, protected in plastic and closed with red wax. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded many times. It was a contract. But not just any contract. It named someone called Theodore King as interim president of Grand Industries, dated before the accident. That changed everything. Emily put the paper back, her heart racing. It proved that Daniel had known about the scheme before disappearing, and that he had tried to protect himself. When he came out of the bathroom, towel around his shoulders and his face freshly washed, he looked like a different man. Less wounded, more present. Did you find anything? He asked. Emily hesitated. No, I just washed your clothes. He looked at her for a moment. He knew she was lying, but he respected her silence. Dinner was simple, hot soup and toasted bread. They ate in silence until he asked, "Do you have someone?" Emily took a moment to answer. "I did, but he left when life got hard." "What about you?" Daniel gave a sad smile. "I had everything, and lost it all, one piece at a time." She felt the weight of his words, and she saw it, too. The emptiness in his eyes wasn't just about losing status. It was about losing people, losing affection, losing faith. After dinner, they sat on the porch for a few minutes. The street was empty, as if holding its breath with them. "Emily," he said, "if something happens to me, don't trust anyone who claims to be on my side." She frowned. "Not even your family?" He paused. "Especially them." A car horn sounded in the distance, an ordinary noise. Yet in that moment, it felt like a threat. Emily gripped the armrest of her chair. They were living among ticking time bombs. Later that night, she locked every door and left the dog in the hallway. Daniel slept in the guest room, but she knew neither of them would truly rest. In her mind, the name Theodore King kept repeating like a warning. Who was he? And why take over the company on the exact day of the accident? Emily opened her laptop and began to search. The more she read, the more certain she became. Daniel wasn't running from justice. He was running from a system rotten to the core. That night, before falling asleep, Emily wrote a single sentence in her journal. "He is not who the world says he is. And maybe I'm not either." The sound of helicopters had faded, but what loomed now was a silent storm. And at its center stood a common woman and a powerful man who chose, for a fleeting moment, to trust each other. Little did they know, what was coming next would test that trust in the most devastating way. The next morning was overcast and heavy. The air felt thicker, as if the entire city knew something was about to happen. Emily woke before her alarm, eyes tired, mind on high alert. She walked to the front window and pulled the curtain aside. What she saw made her step back instantly. Two dark cars were parked on the corner, the same ones from the night before. Only this time, they weren't trying to hide. Daniel was already awake, sitting on the edge of the bed, arms resting on his knees. They didn't leave, she said. He didn't answer. He just stood and began putting on the same shirt, now washed. You need to run, Emily said firmly. You too, he replied, then looked at her. They're not after me. They're after what I know, and now that you helped me, you're part of this. She felt a knot form in her throat. He was right, and she knew it. Minutes later, there was a knock at the door. 3 firm taps, then silence. Emily walked to the entrance, her heart pounding. Through the peephole, she saw a different man, this time light-colored suit, neatly combed hair, a polished smile. He didn't look like the police, he looked like someone important. My name is Theodore King, he said, as if he already knew she was watching. May we talk, Miss Emily? The name made her blood run cold. Theodore King, the man who took over Grant Industries after Daniel's disappearance. Emily took a deep breath. She didn't answer. She turned back to Daniel. It's him, she whispered. His eyes closed slowly. I knew he'd come. He wants to make sure I stay silent. Emily's legs trembled. What do I do? Daniel stepped closer and took her hands. You listen and lie, as if your life depends on it, because it might. Emily returned to the door and opened it just a crack. What do you want? Theodore kept his smile. I didn't come here to create tension. I know a woman of your integrity would never hide a fugitive. She held his gaze. I don't know what you're talking about. He tilted his head slightly. I just wanted to make sure you're okay. This neighborhood can be unsafe. The subtle threat hung in the air. Emily kept her face calm. I'm fine. Thank you. And she closed the door without another word. That afternoon, the cars remained. Point 1 had dark windows and the engine running nonstop. Emily locked every window. Daniel moved carefully through the house, avoiding any shadows near the front. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was strategic. A breath held back, waiting for the right moment to act. That night, just when things seemed calm, a letter was slipped under the door. No return address. No envelope. Just one sentence. Every lie has a price. Emily showed it to Daniel. He read it and nodded. They're surrounding us with fear. That's what they do. She sat at the kitchen table. So what do we do now? Wait. Run. He looked around. They want something. But as long as they think you don't know anything, they hesitate. Emily felt the weight of it all becoming more real. It wasn't just about him anymore. It was about her. Her house, her life, her name. Later that night, someone knocked quietly on the back window. Emily approached slowly, a knife in hand. When she pulled back the curtain, she saw a hooded woman. Don't scream, she whispered. I'm from Daniel's old team. Emily hesitated. The woman lifted her sleeve, revealing a tattoo on her wrist, a symbol Daniel would recognize. Emily rushed to him. When he saw the mark, he exhaled with relief. It's Sophia. You can trust her. She saved my life once. Sophia came in through the back door. She was quick, direct. You have a maximum of 36 hours before they make you both disappear. Emily froze. Disappear how? Sophia answered without emotion. Silent transfers. Threats. False accusations. Or simply accidents. Daniel nodded. Theodore's closer than I thought. Sophia handed him an encrypted phone and a small folder. Here are the documents you need to expose everything, but you have to do it in the right place. The plan was bold. Go to the next town, where an independent journalist was willing to publish the truth, but they couldn't leave without being followed. I could be the distraction, Emily suggested. Daniel shook his head. They'll hurt you. But she stood her ground. I brought you this far. I'm not stopping now. Sophia watched them silently, then gave a small smile. She's exactly the kind of woman these men underestimate. And that's why she might just win. Emily studied the maps Sophia had drawn with precision. Small paths through alleys, shortcuts between abandoned properties, and a meeting point off the grid. Are you sure this works? She asked. Sophia nodded. I used this route to get Daniel out of the first ambush. Emily took a deep breath. She would now be the bait, the invisible, ordinary woman no one would suspect, until it was too late. Tell me what to do. I'm in. Daniel insisted she didn't have to risk it, that they would find another way. But Emily stood firm. You already lost your name, your company, your freedom that I won't let you lose your only chance at justice too. He looked at her with a mix of pride and fear. If anything happens to you, she cut him off gently. If it does, it's because I chose this, and I don't regret it. Sophia handed her the encrypted phone. Only call when you're out of the danger zone. At midnight, Emily left through the side door with a simple backpack and quiet steps. She was dressed like someone going to the market. Nothing drew attention. The cars were still there, but didn't react. Daniel watched from the window, his chest tight. Sophia stayed hidden, radio and map in hand. When Emily turned the corner and vanished into the dark night, they both knew there was no turning back. Emily walked through dim streets, her hood hiding her face. She crossed 3 silent blocks until she heard an engine rev. One of the cars was following. She kept her pace steady. She couldn't run, couldn't look scared. She turned right, as planned, and entered a 24-hour laundromat. She sat down, pretending to sort clothes. The car drove slowly past the front window. She barely breathed, but they didn't stop. She waited 5 more minutes, then slipped out the back of the laundromat and into the alley. A white van was parked with its lights off. As she approached, the door slid open. A middle-aged man with the face of someone who had seen too much waved her in. Emily? She nodded. I'm Will. Get in. She climbed in fast, and the van pulled away in silence. Behind her, the quiet felt heavy. Inside, Emily handed the phone and folder to Will. He flipped through the documents, his face growing tense. If this is real, it's bigger than I imagined. She nodded. It's real, and he's risking everything to make it known. Will connected the phone to an old laptop. Images, recordings, and proof began to appear. You just put your name in the line of fire, Emily. She stared at the screen. Someone had to. Meanwhile, back at the house, Daniel and Sophia waited for a signal. The radio was silent. Time felt frozen. Sophia kept her eyes on the window, a small gun at her waist. Daniel paced in circles. Will she make it? He asked. Sophia didn't turn. She's stronger than she looks. It's always the quiet ones who become earthquakes. Daniel looked toward the door where Emily had vanished. She already has. An hour later, the phone rang. A blocked number. Sophia answered with a passphrase. It was Emily. I'm here. He is everything. It goes live tomorrow. Sophia smiled. You did well, girl. Daniel took the phone. Are you okay? She hesitated. I am, but they know I have something. They're following me. I need to disappear for a while. His voice cracked. Come back to me when it's over. She answered, firm. If it's safe. If you're still you. The call dropped. Daniel stared at the phone in silence. Sophia shut everything down, wiped the traces. Now it's your turn, she said. We have one final move. Daniel nodded. The next day, he would show himself, not as a fugitive, but as the man the world thought was lost. But there was a risk that if the article went live before he appeared, they could silence Emily. Or him. Or both. The sun began to rise as Daniel sat alone on the porch. The street was empty, but the world was waking up, and with it, so was the truth he thought of Emily. Her courage, her calm in chaos, how she saw him, even when he no longer knew who he was. And there, surrounded by uncertainty and a system that wanted him silenced, Daniel made a quiet vow. If she survives, he will tell the whole story, for her. And with her, Daniel paced quietly inside the small room where he was hiding. Sunlight filtered through the half-open curtain, drawing golden lines across the floor. Outside, the world looked normal, but inside him, there was no ground left to stand on. Emily was far away, and for the first time in months, he felt ready to remember. He sat on the couch, took a deep breath, and opened the envelope he had carried since the night of the accident. Inside was the beginning and the end of everything. Document was a copy of the last decision he had made as CEO. To block the illegal sale of Grant Industries patents to shell companies tied to politicians and hidden shareholders. It was a dangerous move, and he knew it. But what truly shattered him wasn't the numbers. It was the betrayal. The name listed as author of the proposal was his older brother, Charles Grant, his mentor, his blood. The first knife didn't come from an enemy. It came from family. Charles had always been the charismatic one. Daniel, the discreet one. While his brother gave speeches and smiled for cameras, Daniel crafted strategy and held the company together. For years, he trusted blindly. But that cursed week, everything turned upside down. An intercepted email, a strange meeting with hostile board members, and then the accident. Daniel had no time to react. He was in the car when the brakes failed on the highway. All he remembered was the curve, the sound of twisting metal, the darkness of the water as the car plunged, and the silence, that silence still, followed him at night, every time he closed his eyes. When he awoke, he was in an isolated cabin, with Sophia tending his injuries. "You were lucky," she had said. But Daniel knew. It wasn't luck. It was a mistake. They thought they had killed him. But he was still breathing. Now, he was an inconvenient ghost. Weeks passed in quiet rehabilitation, hidden from the world. He watched his name dragged through the mud in newspapers, accused of embezzlement, fraud, abuse of power, his image destroyed, publicly by the very ones who had betrayed him in private. And while watching his reputation crumble, Daniel grieved something else. His wife, Mariana, killed 2 years earlier in a so-called domestic accident he had never believed, and now it all felt like the same signature behind the attempt on his own life. Mariana was light. She had a soft but steady soul. She was the one who made him laugh during their first meeting, the one who called him the romantic bureaucrat. She saw what he tried to hide, that behind the suit and control was a scared boy trying to prove he was worth something without being the older brother. When she died, Daniel didn't just lose love, he lost his voice and his desire to trust. Until Emily had come into his life just like Mariana did, in the middle of chaos, uninvited, unplanned, asking for nothing. She had simply stayed and didn't run. That he thought of her now, holding his old wedding ring between his fingers. That he no longer wore it, but never removed it from his wallet. That it was his silent anchor, and maybe his guilt. If he had listened to Mariana, maybe he would have seen the danger. Maybe she would still be alive. The truth about Mariana's death was still a shadow. The housekeeper who had seen everything was fired the next day. The police closed the case in 48 hours. Daniel was numb. And when he tried to reopen the investigation, the threats began. First subtle, then direct. Now, he understood. Mariana knew too much, and she had chosen to stand against them. Just like Emily now. That he wondered how long fate would let strong women stay close to him before taking them away. Outside, a pigeon landed on the porch railing. Daniel watched it. It was strange how the world kept going. Even when someone's soul had turned to dust, he grabbed a pen and started writing. Words for Emily he didn't know if he'd ever get to say them out loud. But he wanted her to know that even in silence, he had heard her. And if the world collapsed again, she had the right to know the truth about him. "Emily, if I don't come back, know that you were the only sincere gesture I received since everything fell apart. That I don't expect you to save me. But I hope you never stop believing in your choices. You saw something in me that even I had lost sight of, and because of that, you deserve more than what's left of me." Daniel, he folded the paper carefully, placed it back inside the envelope, and hid it beneath a loose floorboard. That letter was more than words. It was a silent farewell. In case there was no return, Daniel knew he wasn't a hero. He wasn't a martyr. But he also wasn't the villain the world had bought without question. And Emily, she was the only person who looked at him without demanding explanations, without waiting for an official version. And that disarmed him more than any weapon ever could. That afternoon, Sophia returned with news. "The story airs tonight." The reporter was offered money to kill it. He refused. Daniel felt a bitter kind of relief. They'll try something before it airs. They'll strike. Sophia nodded. "That's what I'd do." They both knew the window between truth and tragedy was narrow. They had to move fast. She handed him a tracking chip. "If you disappear again, I want to know where they left your body." Daniel chuckled, but it was a dry sound. "You really think it'll happen?" Sophia answered bluntly. "I think they'll try to stop it, and when that happens, someone always pays the price." Daniel went silent. He was willing to pay, but he didn't want it to be Emily. She needs to disappear. For a while, until this all blows over. Sophia nodded. "I've got a place. Safe. No one will find her." Before leaving, Daniel called the number Emily had given him. It rang twice. On the third, her voice answered, tired but alive. "Hi." He closed his eyes. "Are you safe?" "Yes, but I saw something." A man followed me to the terminal. He didn't say anything, but I know he was one of them. Daniel clenched his fist. They know. Emily whispered. Do you think we still have time? He answered firmly. We do, but we have to use it well. The call didn't last long. Few words, long silences. When they hung up, Daniel felt a strange emptiness, as if they had just spoken for the last time. Without saying goodbye, he pocketed the phone, stood up, and walked to the window. The street still looked calm, but now he saw beyond the surface. He spotted the gray car parked at the end of the block, the same plate that had shown up the night of the accident. They were there, waiting. For the right moment, he closed the curtains, returned to the bedroom, and put on the only clean clothes he had left. Dark shirt, plain pants, nothing that identified him as a CEO, just a man trying to survive. Sophia stood in the doorway watching him. Ready for the most dangerous part? Daniel nodded. Ready to be who I should have been all along. No title, no shield, just truth. She tossed the car keys to him. Then let's flip the script. Before they left, Daniel returned to the hiding spot and took the letter. He looked at it one last time, then tucked it into the inner pocket of his shirt. If I fall, will you give this to her? Sophia met his eyes. You won't fall. But deep down, she knew the war was just beginning, and not everyone would walk away whole. That was the cost of truth, the cost of standing barefoot with an exposed heart against giants. On the drive, Daniel stared out the car window, watching the city he helped build, the same one that had almost killed him. Everything looked the same, but he saw the invisible cracks in the concrete, if lies left fissures that only the broken could recognize. He wasn't seeking revenge, that he wanted justice, but deep down, he knew, in the end, those two often met in the same dark alley, and he was willing to go there, even alone. The old Grand Industries building loomed on the horizon like a sleeping beast. Mirror windows, guards at the entrance, too many artificial lights. That was where everything would begin or end. Daniel took a deep breath. Sophia parked on a side street. The story airs in 2 hours. You going in now? Daniel nodded. They won't wait. And he opened the door without looking back. The man who walked into that building was no longer a fugitive. He was a ticking bomb. Across town, Emily stared out the window of the room where she was hiding. The streetlights painted sad shapes across the sidewalk. She didn't know what Daniel was about to do, but she felt it. Deep in her chest, something burned, an intuition that hurt. And even without seeing him, she whispered into the darkness, come back. Please come back whole. Because, by now, it wasn't just about exposing the truth. That it was about surviving it, even if it cost everything. Night had fallen colder than usual. Emily had barely slept in the last 24 hours, and her eyes burned with exhaustion. The room where she was hiding was small, with heavy curtains and a single yellow bulb hanging over the table. In that silence, every sound was amplified. A creak on the floor, a slow-moving car, a phone notification that made her heart race. It was as if the world had shrunk and grown more dangerous. Will, the journalist, was in another room editing the piece set to go live in under an hour. What Emily had delivered was explosive, evidence of fraud, recordings, documents. But publishing it didn't mean safety. Quite the opposite. It was like striking a match in a room full of gas, and everyone knew it. Once this goes live, there's no turning back, he had said. Emily just nodded. She had crossed that line the moment she helped Daniel in the rain. She stood up, walked to the bathroom, and splashed cold water on her face. It didn't erase the fatigue, but it helped her stay alert. When she returned to the room, she saw something. Under the door, an envelope. No sound, no knock. Just there, she approached slowly. The paper was slightly crumpled, as if shoved quickly. Inside, a short note. Silence or goodbye. Final warning. A deep shiver ran up her spine. Will ran in when he heard her stifled gasp. He read the note and turned pale. They found you. Emily shook her head. How? I don't even know exactly where I am. Will locked every bolt. This changes everything. If they made it here, they could be anywhere. Emily struggled to breathe. Real fear had a smell, a texture, and now it was knocking on her door. She remembered Daniel's words. Don't trust anyone who says they're on my side. Will suggested they relocate, but Emily refused. The story needs to go out. I won't leave until it's published. If I run now, It's like letting them win. He didn't argue. He just prepared the computer to send everything at midnight. As agreed with Daniel and Sophia. Time crawled. Every minute dragged a ton of tension behind it. Then, a noise outside. Footsteps. Tires. Maybe both. Emily peeked through a slit in the curtain. A man stood across the street, wearing a suit. No umbrella, even in the drizzle. Just watching. She stepped back, heart pounding. He's just standing there, not moving. Well, look too. Psychological pressure. They want you to break before the story does. Emily sat down, hugging her knees. It's working. But beneath the fear, something began to rise, not courage, but rage. She stood slowly, returned to the window, and yanked the curtain open. The man was still there. Emily stared at him, even though she trembled inside. She raised her hand, not to wave, but to say, "I see you too." The man didn't react. He simply turned and got into a black car that pulled away slowly. Will gave her a respectful smile. They're not used to resistance. Emily whispered, "They're about to learn." Minutes later, the clock struck 11:55 p.m. 5 minutes. Until publication, Emily stared at the screen like she was willing time to freeze, but time didn't freeze. It 12:01 a.m. The article went live, all of it, name by name, document by document. A photo of Daniel looking out a window with the headline, "Missing CEO exposes his brother and a network of corruption." The world changed right then, and their Will's phone lit up like fireworks. Reporters, agencies, threats, bribes to take the story down. But it was too late. It was already spreading across dozens of news sites, shared by thousands. Emily sat on the floor. She cried silently. She didn't know if it was relief or despair, or both. The fear was still there, but now, so was the truth, and it had a name, a face, a signature. Emily Monroe, ordinary citizen, witness to a rotting system. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, Sophia called Daniel. "We did it." He didn't answer right away. He was staring at an old photo of Mariana on his phone. She would have done the same, and she would have done it better. Sophia interrupted the melancholy. "They're going to come harder now. They're exposed, and wounded animals bite deeper." Daniel slipped the phone into his pocket. "Let them come. This time, I'm wide awake." Emily stared at her phone screen as notifications exploded one after another. Some messages read, "Brave." Others, "You'll regret this." But between the support and the poison, one thing was clear. She had done what needed to be done. None of those messages, no matter how vicious, hurt more than the years she'd spent believing she couldn't make a difference. Now she knew she could. But she also knew that came with a price. In the early hours of the morning, the power went out in the building. The generator didn't start. Will's eyes widened. "This isn't an accident." Emily turned on the flashlight on her phone. They moved quickly, gathering the essential equipment and heading down the stairs. The building was dark, but the street still had some movement. They couldn't stay. "Let's go to the old warehouse where I hid Daniel's first interview," Will suggested. Emily just nodded. Their footsteps quickened in the dark. Outside, Will's car was still there, but the back window had a crack, like a warning. That he started the engine in silence and drove without headlights until they left the block. "They're not after the story. They're after you," he said. "If they silence you, they control the narrative." Emily looked out at the city. Every lit window felt like a potential threat. "They're going to try," Will muttered. "They already are." When they reached the warehouse, an abandoned space on the outskirts, they locked all the entrances. The silence there was different, heavier, but also freer. "We stay here until the storm passes, or until someone finds us." Emily took off her coat and sat on the cement floor, staring at the dark ceiling. "Do you think he's okay?" she asked. Will answered with another question. "He's alive because of you. Do you really think he's going to stop now?" Hours later, Emily dozed off with her head resting on a pile of old blankets. She dreamed in fragments, Mariana laughing, with Daniel, a house on fire, a car with no brakes, and someone holding her hand tightly. She woke up to her phone vibrating. It was an unknown number. She answered slowly. Silence for 3 seconds. Then a deep voice. "Are you ready to pay for what you've done?" Before she could reply, the line went dead. She showed the number to Will, who quickly traced it. Encrypted number. But the signal came from within the city, near Grant's headquarters. Emily bit her lip. It's Charles, or someone working for him. She could no longer separate fear from intuition. Everything felt urgent and inevitable. It was like being in the eye of the storm, the piece before the next hit. And she knew the next one was coming. Later that day, a car pulled up outside. Emily froze, but it was Sophia, alone, her eyes tired. Daniel wants you to come to him. Now. Emily hesitated. Is it safe? Sophia shook her head. No, but it's necessary. Emily looked at Will. He nodded. Go. I've got this. Emily grabbed her coat, her backpack, and followed Sophia without another word. The decision had already been made inside her long before the question arrived. On the way, Sophia explained the plan. Daniel's going public tonight. He's going to take it all on, stand in front of the world and say, yes, I was betrayed, and I'm alive, but he wants you there. He wants to show that there's someone by his side who wears no suit, signs no contract. Just courage. Emily looked out the car window. The city passed by like a movie, and this time, she wasn't just watching. She was the story. They arrived at the secret location for the statement, an old, deactivated theater, where a small team of independent journalists waited with cameras ready. Daniel stood on stage, in a dark suit, hair slightly disheveled, but eyes steady. When he saw Emily walk in, his shoulders relaxed. He didn't smile, but his eyes said everything. She was there, and with that, he could face anything. In the empty audience, Emily sat in the front row. Daniel looked at her for several seconds before turning toward the cameras. The world was about to watch, the lights warming up, the microphone capturing even the sound of his breath. But in that moment, nothing else existed but her, the ordinary woman who, with a quiet decision in the rain, had changed the fate of an empire. And he knew, no matter what he said there, what made him real was what she saw when she looked at him. The lights of the old theater flickered on, revealing the marks of time on the torn curtains and dusty seats. But the center of the stage was clear, a makeshift podium, 2 cameras, and microphones pointed directly at Daniel. Emily watched in silence. She felt like she was about to witness something that would either make history or be buried like so many cries ignored by time. He adjusted the microphone, took a deep breath, and began. My name is Daniel Grant, and I'm alive. The words echoed through the empty hall and reverberated instantly across social media, where the broadcast was live. Within seconds, thousands of views. Within minutes, tens of thousands. The man presumed dead, the CEO accused of crimes, was right there, standing, wounded but present. Daniel didn't speak like a businessman. He spoke like a man who had lost everything and chose not to die in silence. He spoke about the accident, about the evidence, about Charles. He listed dates, names, diverted sums. He pointed out political connections. He showed documents. He didn't shout. He didn't dramatize. He spoke like someone who no longer feared being dismissed. I'm not innocent in everything, he said. But the crime they tried to kill me for, that one, I didn't commit. And finally, he pointed to Emily, seated in the front row. She's the one who reminded me that truth isn't a luxury. It's survival. Emily felt her eyes fill with tears. The camera briefly turned toward her, capturing her real, human face. She wasn't an activist. She wasn't a reporter. She was an ordinary woman who had stopped on the road on instinct and walked into a war she never chose. The stream exploded. Comments, shares, live headlines. Daniel Grant returns and accuses own brother. The comeback of a betrayed CEO, the woman who helped dig up the truth. In a mirrored glass office building, Charles Grant watched the broadcast with narrowed eyes. He snapped the remote control in half. Idiot, he muttered. His advisors exchanged glances. One of them said, he's got nothing left. Just words. Charles replied, words are grenades when the listener no longer trusts you. He stood. Prepare the counterattack. We'll bury him, and her along with him. Back at the theater, the filming crew ended the broadcast. Daniel stepped down from the stage and approached Emily. Thank you for coming. She replied with a steady look. I wouldn't come for anyone else. Only you. He nodded, gently brushing her hand. There was something silent growing between them. Not passion. Not yet. Something rarer. Trust born from ruin. Sophia approached. We have to go? They'll retaliate. They exited through the back of the theater, getting into two different cars. Emily rode with Sophia, while Daniel left with a trusted journalist. In the minutes that followed, global trending topics split between outrage, support, theories, and memes. But away from the spotlight, they knew the hardest part was just beginning. Daniel was no longer missing, that he was now a declared enemy. And Emily, the most fragile link in the chain. And somehow, the strongest in their temporary hideout. Emily took a shower and sat with wet hair, staring at her backpack in the corner. Everything she owned fit inside. Simple clothes, a worn-out book, and a small bottle of perfume her mother had given her years ago. She opened it, breathed in the scent. The memory of childhood hit her like a punch to the chest. How had the girl who never dared to dream become a woman capable of facing down empires? Sophia appeared at the door. "You're a target now." Emily nodded. "I always was. The only difference is, now they know." Sophia walked in and sat beside her. "You have two choices. Disappear until things calm down, or stay with Daniel, knowing it could cost you everything." Emily closed her eyes. "He stayed when I asked for help. I'm staying now." Sophia smiled with respect. "Then you're not just brave. You're dangerous too." Hours later, a notification popped up. "Is Emily Monroe lying? See what we found." An anonymous video showed out-of-context clips, cuts, distortions. They were trying to smear her. Classic tactic. Discredit the woman to discredit the man. Sophia closed the video. "It's not about what they say. It's about what you do with it." Emily stood up slowly. "Then let's show the truth. Again and again, until they can't hide it anymore." Emily spent the night writing her response. It wasn't a defense, nor a rant. It was a testimony. A simple, direct account of what she saw, what she lived, and what she felt since the night she stopped her car in the rain. "I'm not an activist. I'm not an expert. I'm just someone who chose not to pretend I didn't see." She posted the text alongside a photo of her holding Daniel's injured hand. Within less than an hour, the post went viral. Behind the scenes, Charles gathered his lawyers and crisis consultants. "She's become a symbol," said one of them. "If we attack her more, we'll be seen as villains in the public eye." Charles rubbed his face. "Then we won't attack her directly. We'll pull the ground from under her. Her record, her origins, who she used to be." He smirked, cold. "Everyone has something. And if she doesn't, we'll make something up." It was dirty play in its cruelest form, turning the honest into suspects. Sophia heard about the plan before Emily even felt the effects. "They're trying to erase you from the side. They'll dig into your past. School, jobs, relationships." Emily shrugged. "I have nothing to hide." Sophia gave a crooked smile. "It's not about what you have. It's about what they can make it seem like you have." Emily fell silent for a moment, then answered firmly, "Let them come. I've got nothing to hide and everything to show." Daniel followed everything from a distance, hidden in an old hotel under a false name. Every time Emily's name appeared, his blood quickened. She had become his anchor to the real world, not his salvation, but his grounding, his reminder that even when the world treated him as disposable, someone saw him and believed that. He picked up his phone and sent one message: "Don't let them turn you into what they fear. You are proof of what they're trying to erase." Emily read the message while sitting in a random cafe, wearing a hoodie and sunglasses, trying to appear invisible. She smiled, didn't reply, but that phrase echoed inside her. That was it. They feared those who couldn't be bought, those who owed no favors, those who wouldn't lower their eyes. And she, in all her simplicity, was a threat precisely because of that, because she chose to see, because she stopped that night, because she reached out her hand. That evening, Sophia brought worrying news. "A warrant has been issued. They're going to try to arrest you for obstruction of justice." Emily's eyes widened. "But I'm a witness." Sophia nodded. "And witnesses get in the way of narratives." Emily swallowed hard. They were really willing to go that far. But something inside her, once fear, was now turning to steel. "They can try to silence me, but the truth is already out, and it won't go back in the cage." Daniel reached out to a retired judge he knew was still honest. He showed documents, pleaded for help ensuring Emily's safety. "She can't pay the price for all this alone." The judge looked him in the eyes, then stand by her. Show up. Protect her as a man, not just as a victim. Daniel nodded. And in that moment, he realized that exposing the truth had only been half the war. The other half was staying, being present. The next morning, an anonymous video was posted. It showed clips of Daniel and Emily together, narrated in a twisted tone, trying to paint their connection as part of a manipulative emotional scheme that IT was weak, but strong enough to spread doubt. Emily saw the video over breakfast and laughed. They're getting desperate. Sophia nodded. That's when they make mistakes. And when we strike. Well, rushed in. We got a national network. They want both of you for a live interview. Emily looked at Sophia. Together? Well, nodded. Together. For the first time. She took a deep breath, looked at the mirror. She no longer saw the girl she once was. She wasn't just the woman from the roadside anymore. She was the face of truth in a war of versions. And for the first time, she felt ready for it in the makeshift dressing room. Minutes before going live, Daniel held Emily's hand. She looked at him with calm. Are you afraid? He asked. She nodded. But I'm more afraid of going back to who I was before I met you. He gently squeezed her fingers. Then let's go? Not to convince them, but to remind the world that there are still eyes that see and hands that won't let go. And together, they stepped onto the stage. The studio lights were on, and the silence before the broadcast was deafening. Emily and Daniel sat side by side in simple chairs, surrounded by cameras, cables, and watchful eyes. The host began with a grave expression. Tonight, the country watches a reunion few believed possible, and a truth many tried to bury. As she heard those words, Emily felt the weight of the moment in her stomach. Daniel simply closed his eyes for a second, and the red camera light turned on. The interview started with a direct question. Daniel, why now? He didn't hesitate. Because if I waited any longer, there might be no one left to tell what really happened. The journalist didn't go easy. Emily was asked too. Did you know who you were dealing with? She answered firmly. I knew. He needed help, and that was enough. The tone remained contained, but there was electricity in the air. The truth was broadcasting live. The interview broke viewership records. News outlets, social media, even radio stations broadcasted clips. The interview became a national event. The audience was divided. Some gave standing ovations. Others remained skeptical, but no one was indifferent. When Daniel revealed the documents live, forged contracts, recordings of secret meetings, faces behind the scenes began to pale. Among those faces was Charles Grant's. Charles watched from his penthouse, surrounded by close allies. The phone rang nonstop. His lawyer shook his head. This can't be contained anymore. The prosecution is requesting to reopen investigations. Charles slammed the table. They won't destroy me. He's not going to win. A pale assistant interrupted. The international press is picking this up, and Emily Monroe has officially been named a protected witness. Her name was now sealed as a symbol in the studio. The interview ended with one final question. Are you afraid of what might come next? Daniel looked at Emily. She answered. The fear didn't go away, but it no longer controls us. The journalist paused for a few seconds, then said, Thank you for the truth. The camera turned off, but the story was just beginning. Outside the studio, a crowd awaited them, applause, posters, and too many cameras. Sophia quickly cleared the path. Cars are ready. We're heading to the safe hotel. Emily waved briefly, but deep down, she felt exposed, too visible, too vulnerable. The car sped away. The interview kept replaying, but something inside her wouldn't relax. Her intuition, the same one that made her stop on that rainy road weeks ago, now screamed in silence, and she had learned to listen. Hours later, Daniel received an anonymous email with a video file that he watched it alone, sound low. The footage showed Emily leaving the studio from a different angle. Someone had filmed her from a distance, tracked her every step at the end. A short caption. You showed the truth. Now we'll show you what it will cost. Daniel felt his blood run cold that he rushed to Emily's room, but she wasn't there. The team panicked. Sophia pulled the security footage that a van had parked just minutes earlier and sped off unusually fast at Emily's. Phone didn't answer. Daniel's heart pounded like a hammer. She's been taken. Sophia was already typing codes into her phone. She had trackers. We'll find her. Daniel dropped to his knees, face in his hands. I promised to protect Her. Sophia cut in. Then get up. We still have time. Emily woke with her head throbbing. She was in a dark warehouse. Hands tied point, one of the masked men watched her silently. You're making a mistake, she said, voice trembling. The mistake was yours, sweetheart, he replied. You thought you could mess with what no one touches and walk away alive. She didn't answer. She breathed deeply. She was scared, yes, but now she had a cause. Meanwhile, Daniel and Sophia were tracking the signal from the chip hidden in Emily's shoe. The location led them to an industrial zone at no time to wait for backup. Daniel made a decision. She pulled me out of death. Now, it's my turn. Sophia grabbed the gun from the glove compartment. If we go in, we might not come back. Daniel closed his eyes for a moment. Then let it be that, the end or the beginning. Emily tried to keep her mind steady as the minutes dragged on. The man watching her removed his mask for a moment, and she recognized him. He was one of the drivers from Grant Industries. You used to work with Daniel, she said. He laughed. Cold and sharp. I worked for whoever paid more. And right now, keeping you quiet is worth more than my whole salary. Emily didn't respond. She just looked him in the eyes with something he didn't expect. Pity. The next moment, the screech of tires echoed through the warehouse. The men jumped to their feet, alert. Daniel burst through the side door, his eyes blazing with fury, and Sophia followed right behind, gun in hand. The first hit landed hard. Daniel tackled one of the captors to the ground, while Sophia took down another with military precision. The third man fled through a side exit. Emily was pale, but conscious. You really came. Daniel quickly untied her, trembling. I promised. And this time, I kept it. Emily cried silently in his arms. Sophia urged them. We need to move before backup arrives. They ran to the car, escaping through the opposite route. The sky was beginning to lighten. The city woke up, unaware that in those early hours, the truth had nearly been silenced forever, but it failed because someone chose not to run hours. Later, the police surrounded the warehouse. The van had been identified. The names involved were being tracked, and public pressure reached historic levels. The prosecution accelerated the arrest warrants. Charles Grant was isolated. Point two of his closest allies had agreed to testify that a court order froze his assets in 4 countries. The empire was crumbling. Emily received medical care but refused hospitalization. I don't want a hospital room. I want to be where things are happening. Daniel never left her side. The interview replayed for the 3rd time, now subtitled in 10 languages. Social media was flooded with support messages. Hashtag You Are Not Alone became a worldwide trend. But Emily wasn't thinking about fame. She only felt relief for still being here. Sitting beside Daniel, she whispered, I thought it was the end. He answered, softly, so did I. But maybe it's just the beginning. They looked at each other with tenderness. There were no grand gestures and no vows, just a real presence and a silent choice to walk side by side. Even through the wreckage, Sophia approached. Charles is missing, but there's no way out. When he resurfaces, it'll be to fall. That afternoon, Emily recorded a short video, no makeup, no script, just her facing the camera. I was kidnapped for telling the truth, but they couldn't silence me. And if I have to, I'll say it all again. For justice, for those without a voice. Because I'm not the exception, that I'm the reflection of every woman who chose not to bow her head. The video reached 12 million views in less than 24 hours. Daniel watched Emily with silent admiration. She wasn't a piece on his board. She was the player he had never had by his side. Strong, calm, principled. You changed everything, he said. She smiled. I was just myself. He held her hand, gently. And that is what saved me. For the first time, he wasn't talking about the company or reputation or Ward. He was talking about himself, the man behind the name. The next morning, Charles Grant was found trying to leave the country with fake documents. He was arrested at the airport, handcuffed in front of the cameras. You won't get away with this, he shouted. But the crowd outside only responded with applause. The last words he muttered were, all this because of one ordinary woman. And in that moment, the world understood. It's always an ordinary woman who starts a revolution. Emily watched the arrest from the safe house porch, sipping hot tea. Daniel sat beside her. They said nothing for a few minutes. Then she broke the silence. Are you still afraid? He smiled slightly. I am. But now, I know you can walk forward even with fear. Emily rested her head on his shoulder. And there, in the quiet, between the end and a new beginning, something rarer than power was born. Permanence. The sky that morning glowed with a soft golden hue, as if the universe itself were breathing in peace after the storm. Emily walked barefoot along the porch of the house, where she now lived temporarily, a gentle silence accompanying each step. Grass grew in the corners of the yard, the distant sound of children playing echoed from another street, and a bird perched quietly on the wooden fence. The world was spinning again. But she was no longer the same. Daniel appeared at the door holding 2 mugs of tea. Keeping the ritual alive, he said with a quiet smile. Emily took hers and sat on the steps. They drank slowly, without haste. They didn't talk much in the mornings. They didn't need to. What they had built in the spaces between words and glances and shared scars was stronger than any promise. There were no forced happy endings here, only real new beginnings, made by people who had bled and chosen to go on. Charles's downfall had created waves. Other companies were investigated. New names came to light. Daniel was called to testify again, but he refused to return as CEO. Who I was no longer fits who I am now, he said. Instead, he founded a corporate integrity institute, where Emily now led educational projects. We want to teach young people to see before they need to be stopped on a road, to understand the value of a single gesture. Their story became a symbol, but they declined movie deals and paid interviews. They chose the kind of silence that transforms, not the noise that sells. And with that, they touched more lives than they could have imagined. Schools began debating the power of individual choices. Universities used their case as an example of ethics in times of crisis, and ordinary people started believing they could make a difference too. Emily received letters from women all over the country. One of them said, "You reminded me I don't have to be extraordinary to be necessary." She cried while reading it, because that's exactly how she had felt that rainy night. Necessary, for the first time, without needing to prove anything, just for choosing to see. To stop. To stay. Daniel slowly rebuilt a part of his relationship with his sister, who had distanced herself out of fear. They reconnected in silence, with no pressure. He also began visiting his mother's house again, now empty, but full of memories. One day, he took Emily with him. He showed her the room where he grew up, the poetry book Mariana gave him before she died. Emily listened without interrupting. Then she held his hand. No words, just presence. They never publicly announced they were together. There was no label, but there were routines, small, consistent, like the morning tea, the evening walks, the way Daniel turned off his phone when she spoke. Or how Emily left a handwritten quote on his pillow on days when he woke up too quiet. It was love. Yes, but the kind that didn't need proving, just living. One day, they received a plain box with no sender. Inside were newspaper clippings, old photos from the investigations, and a handwritten note. "I tried to destroy you, but deep down, I envied the courage I never had. You are what the world needs. I hope you do what I couldn't." There was no signature, but they both knew. Charles. It was the confession of a man defeated, not by justice, but by the quiet force of truth. Emily placed the letter in an envelope and locked it in the last drawer of her desk. "Not to remember what he did," she said, "but to remember what we survived." Daniel nodded. "It's easy to forget pain when you're at peace, but it needs to stay. To remind us of who we are." And that's when she understood. No trauma needs to be erased to make room for love. It only needs to be acknowledged and transformed. The foundation, they created a project called Invisible Lighthouse, dedicated to people who did extraordinary things without knowing, like teachers who kept students from dropping out, drivers who stopped for someone in the rain, young people who reported abuse without support. It was their way of saying thank you. Of multiplying. Of saying, you are not alone when you choose to do what's right, even if it doesn't feel like it. One autumn afternoon, Emily wrote in her journal, "I thought I'd lose myself helping someone no one wanted to see. But that's exactly where I found myself, not in his answers, but in the courage I found in me, and in the fact that real love doesn't arrive with noise. It sits beside you. and stays. The foundation received an international award. Daniel was invited to give the speech, but it was Emily who went on stage. Her words were short and powerful. We're not here because we were brave, that we're here because we were afraid. And still, we went. May more people understand that changing the world can start with something simple, like stopping a car in the rain and listening to someone hurting before asking who they are. After the ceremony, they walked home on foot. The sky was overcast and a light rain began to fall. Emily laughed. Always the rain. Daniel took off his coat and placed it on her shoulders. It's like the universe reminding us where it all began. She stopped in the middle of the wet street and looked at him, and where we chose to stay. They laughed and kept walking, hand in hand, like two people who knew they could face any storm. Years later, someone asked Daniel if he'd go back. In time to change anything, he replied, "Yes. I would have stopped before she saw me fallen. I would have walked up to her and said, 'You're going to save me, but the one who'll make you stay is me.'" When Emily heard it, she just smiled, eyes glistening. She knew that among all the possible endings, this one had been the rarest, the one where love remains. They kept life simple, didn't buy mansions, didn't travel the world, but they renovated the old town school, opened a library with donated books, created a listening space where anyone could walk in, sit down, and speak without interruption. Sometimes, all someone needs is to be heard, Emily would say. That's what changed me. Not what he said, but how he looked at me. As if I was enough. On Mariana's birthdays, Daniel left flowers on the park bench where she used to read. Emily went with him. They sat in silence. She didn't feel jealous. She felt honored, because she knew only a man who had truly loved once could love again, fully. And Daniel was like that. Not just a survivor, but someone who had learned how to stay, even when he had every reason to run. The final scene of their story had no applause, no grand announcements. Just an ordinary afternoon. Emily writing letters to young people from the foundation. Daniel assembling a bookshelf in the living room. The kettle on the stove, a record playing softly in the background. And a peace that didn't come from the absence of pain, but from the choice to keep going. Even after it, on their wall hung a framed quote, handwritten by Emily. The truth doesn't change everything at once, but it changes someone, and that someone changes the rest. It was that phrase that guided them, and it was the one they hoped the world would carry forward, because the end of their story was only the beginning of so many others. At the entrance of the foundation, there was a mural with anonymous names, simple stories, and phrases that read, "He stayed." She saw. Someone listened. And at the center, without highlight, a black and white image. Emily handing a cup of tea to Daniel. The caption read, "Where it all began, where courage chose to remain." And so ended a story that wasn't about heroes or martyrs, but about real people who fell, who were wounded, who weren't believed, and still chose to stay. Because sometimes the most revolutionary act is to face everything head on, but to sit beside someone and say, "I'm not leaving." And then simply mean it. If this story touched something inside you, imagine what's still to come. Here, each video is more than entertainment. It's a reminder that true love still exists, that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the choice to stay, even when everything says to walk away. Tell us in the comments. Have you ever had someone stay when they could have left? Share this with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe now, because the next stories are just beginning, and those who believe in love never watch alone. See you in the next one. Don't miss it.